What they're calling the storm of the century is bearing down on Jamaica. We get the latest. Tens of millions of Americans could lose money for food this weekend. We hear from the Agriculture Secretary about why she's not freeing up more funding. And Ken Burns, the famous documentarian, needs no introduction, but he's here to talk about his latest project, which is about all of us. Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe in Washington, in for Major Garrett. Welcome to the Takeout. The island of Jamaica is being slammed with something it's never seen before, a Category 5 hurricane. These are multiple live looks right now at Jamaica, still being battered by the powerful storm. It's already turned deadly with at least 7 lives lost across the region, officials ordering people to shelter in place. Now, what was a Category 5 is now a Category 4 with sustained winds of up to 150 miles per hour as it moves north-northeast at 8 miles per hour. Not too fast. That monster hurricane made landfall near New Hope, Jamaica, with winds of up to 185 miles per hour, one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes ever. And while the streets remain deserted, there are reports of widespread flooding and roofs ripped off buildings. Landslides and fallen trees have caused tens of thousands to lose power. A massive storm surge of up to 13 feet is wiping out large sections of coastline. So we begin with Jason Allen in Portmore, Jamaica. Jason, walk us through what you are seeing on the ground. When the palm trees are blowing the way they are, you know you're in the midst of a big one.
Yeah, and as many of these storms as I've covered, it really never fails to surprise me how strong winds can be on the side or the backside of this storm, even after it has made landfall. We've probably been in conditions like this for a couple of hours now, and to give you perspective, we're a good 75, 80 miles to the east of where the storm made landfall, but we've had wind like this, we've had intense rain, although I don't think it's raining right now. We're just getting spray from the ocean that's coming across, and obviously you can see some of the surface flooding that's happened. Some of this is coming as water just rises up from drains that are in this seaside community here in Portmore.
Now, it hit as a Category 4. It was anticipated and feared as a Category 5, or it is a Category 4 now. This is an island that is not accustomed to this powerful of a hurricane. What are they doing to help people, to get them to either higher ground or safer ground and ensure that people actually take the warning seriously?
Yeah, you're right that, you know, this isn't a spot that really gets hit, not directly by storms. It's been 35 years since they took a direct hit, and a lot of them has slid by since then. So a lot of people feel that they can get through something like this, maybe without a whole lot of preparation. In the low-lying areas yesterday, there were mandatory evacuations ordered. They did tell some people, you've got to go, you got to stay in the shelters. And we know over the last day that the number of people in shelters, it did start to pick up. But many, many people that we talked to, they felt more comfortable staying in their homes. They had difficult decisions to make. It's, do we stay here and risk what could happen in a storm like this, or do we go and potentially lose some of our belongings? That's a very real consideration that people have to make here.
Right, and of course, it's not only home to millions, but also a popular tourist destination. And I know that there had been several stories of Americans who were there either on their honeymoon or for vacation or whatever, who decided to either ride it out or get out of the way. I imagine you've met some of those people.
Yeah, we have met some of those people. You know, not just they're Americans, but people who are here from the UK. A lot of people who come to visit family here and go back and forth between different countries. Yeah, they're nervous. They didn't come here expecting a hurricane, and a lot of those people too are going to be in that heavy resort community that's in Montego Bay on the north side of the island, which is going to be a lot closer to where Melissa is crossing. I imagine those people are seeing conditions far worse right now than what we are seeing here in the greater Kingston area, but they are having to just sit tight in their hotels and wait for this one to pass.
Well, Jason Allen, to you and your team there, we appreciate it. I know we'll be checking in with you guys throughout the evening. Stay safe, and thank you again for your reporting over the last several days. I want to bring in Aretha Taylor. She was a part-time Jamaica resident and is riding the storm out in an Airbnb in Ocho Rios. Ms. Taylor, thank you for joining us. Give us a sense of what things are looking like where you are at this hour.
A lot of winds, heavy, heavy winds, not too much rain, but the winds are coming in. It's picking up now.
And you are there as a part-time resident of the island. Why not try to leave before the storm?
Leave and go where? No, and most of us can't. We're not able to. You know what I mean? So where I am currently, it's pretty safe. I'm uphill, and we have a generator. We have security 24/7 because I live at a Airbnb resort, so it's pretty safe where I am. And you do have local people who are checking in to the resort for safe haven, because there are a lot of people in the area who have already lost power and water, and their homes cannot sustain this wind, so they've checked in here.
What has been the sort of the sense of preparation from local authorities? What were they telling people like you to do or not do in anticipation of the storm?
Well,
and are they still able to communicate?
Well, for right now, the Wi-Fi is down in the area, so that's hard for communication. And as far as preparation, there are a lot of the schools, high schools and middle schools, that they've turned into shelters. And they're also busing people into these shelters. I know people who are staying at the Moon Palace, that's just down the road from me, who are stuck. And so they've turned the ballrooms into shelters for them.
So it sounds like there's been a real good organized effort to use public spaces to whatever extent possible to shelter people. That's great. I mean, what, in the coming hours and days, what would be your top concerns when it comes to the safety of those in your community?
Flooding, because we get flooding very easily, and water for me would not be an issue because we don't run off of the same water that the rest of the country runs off of. It's more of a stream water that we have access to, but I have families and friends who water supply and flooding. That's my main concern for them. Not even so much for myself, but for them.
Well, Aretha Taylor, we appreciate you taking a few moments to give us some real good on-the-ground perspective of what's happening there. Best of luck to you. Hopefully we can check in with you in the coming hours or tomorrow to get a sense of progress and how it went.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks. Okay.
Now, back here to Washington, where more than 42 million Americans are about to lose SNAP benefits. And that's many impacted by the ongoing government shutdown, thinking about how to make sure they can still put food on the table. Our Caitlin Huey-Burns spoke with one of those people.
What does it mean for your life?
Everything. It means everything to me.
What exactly do you think you're going to need to do?
I'll have to ask my children to help me.
And what is...
That's an awful feeling.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins joins us now. Madam Secretary, thank you for being with us. We want to talk to you primarily today about the status of SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that services 42 million Americans and faces a shortfall starting this weekend. Our understanding is there's about $5 to $6 billion in what they call contingency funding available to your department to start distributing next month to the roughly 42 million who are on SNAP across the country. That's not enough to cover the full 8 to 9 billion roughly that it costs per month to feed everyone that's on the program, but could help potentially defray at least some of the costs. The administration has said in recent days it has no plans to pay out that money next month. There are Republicans and Democrats, however, arguing that you can do it. So why not distribute at least partial funding starting on Saturday?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you. We need to level set this entire conversation. On October 10th, we said there will not be SNAP funding on November 1st. On October 24th, we said it again. We've been talking to the governors all along the way. None of that has changed. To fully fund November, and you mentioned this, but to fully fund it would be $9.2 billion for the 44 million Americans that receive the SNAP benefit. When you look back to when this entire ridiculous conversation conversation that we're having over keeping the government open is that began a month ago, and the Republicans said, just keep the government open. We can continue to negotiate about health care for illegal aliens and LGBTQI programming in the Balkans and all the things that are on their list. We'll talk about that, but let's not shut the government down over that. And 12 times the Democrats have voted to keep the government closed. All of this ends tomorrow or today or Thursday. If the Democrats would vote yes, the $9.2 billion would flow, the air traffic controllers would get paid, the food safety inspectors would get paid. You know, I find it very rich that Chuck Schumer and AOC are getting paid, but not the security that keeps them safe. So no, to answer your question, we have said all along that that $5 billion in contingency, we don't believe we have the legal authority to distribute that. We're trying to follow the law here. We've used Band-Aid and duct tape all along this whole last month. And as we've said, it's not going to be there on November 1st. It's time to open the government.
So you say you don't have the legal authority to do it. My understanding is earlier today, Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, who's a top appropriator, meaning the one that hands out the money, told reporters that she believes that's a, quote, novel interpretation of the law that's coming from the Office of Management and Budget and not from your Agriculture Department. That your department itself might feel differently and would be willing to dole out that money. I get the argument that Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill haven't been able to sort this out. It's been 28 days of this nonsense. But you, as Agriculture Secretary, working with the Budget Director and the President, could come up with ways to send that money to people and not hold it back when people are facing the real immediate need of potential hunger.
Well,
so to those who say you're playing politics with Americans' hunger, when you could figure out a way to do this, you say what?
I find it extremely rich that people would say that President Trump or our administration is playing politics with people's hunger when Catherine Clark, one of the leaders of the Democrats, said, oh, we've got great leverage, y'all. We're going to use the poor people and the impoverished programs to get what we want on illegal alien health benefits. Or Chuck Schumer, who said every day that goes by and the more people hurt, the better for our side. Isn't this wonderful? And the staffer who said, let's wait for the planes to fall out of the sky and then maybe we'll reopen the government.
No, I
will say, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen this sort of completely irrational, unreasonable approach to this. Republicans aren't even asking for anything other than to keep the government open.
Right.
So to blame it on our side, I find extremely incredible.
Well, again, I get the games being played up the street at the Capitol. You have executive authorities and executive powers to move money around. And you've moved it around to pay for the troops, and you've moved it around to pay for the FBI, and you've moved it around to keep other elements of the government open. So why not, as president, as budget director, and as agriculture secretary, say, you know what? We're going to find a way to let people eat starting Saturday and Sunday while the games get played up the street. And the blame will be sorted out by the American public. But you have this immediate need, 42 million people, 12% of the country that could go hungry starting Saturday, when you have the ability to do something about it right now.
Well, I don't agree with that. We do not have the ability to do something about it right now. Paying the troops was someone stepping up, an incredibly generous American patriot who said, I'll write that $130 million check.
So why not find a private donor to help pay for people's food?
Will you help me do that? $9.2 billion, maybe George Soros or someone like that will say, you know what? I have been funding these left radical agendas for so long. I'm going to now use my money to help people eat. But this is so easy. All we have to do is vote yes on a continuing resolution. Why won't the Democrats do that? Even their own labor union is saying, please, for the love of God, vote yes. Let's get this government back open and start serving the American people once again.
Well, it's not their labor union, but it is the American Federation of Government Employees that is saying
it's a little
open
more left-leaning, yeah.
Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri has a standalone bill that in essence would allow for SNAP to get paid for. Simple bill, up or down vote. Do you support paying for this during the impasse? Should the president sign that if Congress can pass it?
You know, at the end of the day, this is a congressionally authorized program. We are enacting Congress's will at every step. That's what we're working to do. If Congress votes yes, if Josh's bill is successful, then of course we will move that out and move it forward. Okay. But again, open the government. This is not hard.
The president's talking about allowing the import of Argentinian beef to help lower costs for Americans at the grocery store. Says it'll drive down the costs. American beef groups, associations are disputing this from your home state of Texas, among others. I want to read you something that an Iowa farmer told CBS News this week regarding the beef decision. Quote, "I thought the whole point of tariffs was to bring production back home. And now he's trying to do something to destroy that production," the farmer said, adding, "It feels like being a pawn in a game we're not going to win. We're being used and abused as producers," the farmer added. Why do this? And what would you say to that Iowa farmer?
Well, here's the thing. The president made he made a lot of big promises. A lot of them have already been achieved, but he promised to secure the border and to bring the cost of goods down. Under Biden, they were up 20, 30, 40, 50%. You know the numbers too. So secured the border. I think we're in really good shape there. The president's very proud of that. A lot of the economy has begun to adjust and will continue to adjust to these tax cuts, to a smaller government, to a more robust private sector. The costs will come down. Inflation's already slowing down from where it was previously. So this will catch up. But as with regards to beef, that's why the president is very focused on this. And when he talked about bringing in, for example, Argentinian beef, what people need to understand, and I know there have been a lot of frustration on both sides on this, and on our ranchers as well, is that currently America consumes about 12 million metric tons of beef every year. 10 million we produce here in America and 2 million we import. And this is not new. We've been importing beef for a long time. The Argentinian, and by the way, the beef that we import is the lower cost beef, the ground beef, the beef that McDonald's and Burger King may use to make their burgers, et cetera. So what the president was talking about is perhaps increasing the Argentinian beef into America, but right now we only import about 20,000 metric tons of that 12 million. These are not mutually exclusive goals. We have to open up our ranch lands. We have to incentivize young ranchers. We have to rebuild the beef herd. We've got a lot of challenges. Screwworm down in Mexico. We've closed the ports. No new beef's coming in from the south. And so we're working through all of that. We will get there. Beef will come down. Our ranchers will be supportive. And I think that we're going to be able to move out of this in a really positive way.
To the farmer who says we're being used and abused as producers, though, you say what?
That couldn't be further from the truth. If you think about what President Trump has done for our agriculture community, how he has deregulated, how he has cut taxes, how the One Big Beautiful Bill increased reference prices, how he's been negotiating 24/7 to open up markets around the country, how he has fought for private property rights. When you think about what a President Kamala Harris would have done to our farmers and ranchers, they don't even like crops. They don't even like cattle. They're worried about climate change from methane emissions from cattle. They were closing the markets down to make sure we import more and more. To that farmer or that rancher that may be frustrated or that doesn't understand what the president's talking about, I just say, look at his record, look at the history of standing behind our ag community, our rural communities. No one has done more than President Trump to date for those communities in my lifetime than this president has.
Is this U.S.-China trade deal going to include soybean purchases, and can we trust China to actually purchase those soybeans real quick?
Well, Secretary Botstein said over the weekend that he feels really good. Our soybean farmers are going to be happy, which makes me and a lot of people really happy. But the bigger question, and this is to your point, I think that they're very close to a deal on soybeans and a few other things with China. But this is the president's vision why these other trade deals are so important, so that there isn't one over-reliance on one country, especially a country that arguably is, you know, a foreign adversary. We've got to change that, and that's what President Trump is doing.
All right, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The U.S. strikes 4 more alleged drug boats in the Pacific. We'll get the latest on the rising death toll and where exactly these strikes are taking place. Major League Baseball says it's weighing banning the form of betting at the center of the NBA scandal. Will other pro sports leagues follow suit? And filmmaker Ken Burns, his new documentary on the American Revolution and why he says it's one of the most important events in human history. The Takeout is back in 90 seconds. The U.S. military struck 4 more suspected drug vessels on Monday, killing 14 people and leaving 1 survivor. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted footage of the operation on social media earlier today. It marks the 11th time in under 2 months the U.S. has carried out strikes on vessels allegedly trafficking narcotics. The death toll now stands at least 57. CBS's Charlie Daggett joins us now. Good to see you, sir. You were pointing out that you normally would join us from the Pentagon, but we're not allowed to work out of that building.
First time here. Yep.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Give us a sense now of this specific situation, because this isn't the first time we've had a survivor during one of these attacks. Do we know what happened to that person who responded to that situation?
So right now, where it stands, the Mexican Navy is part of the search and rescue team that's out there. In fact, they're leading it. They haven't recovered this individual. In terms of who it was or who it is, the Colombian government has again criticized the United States and the Trump administration for murdering its civilians. It would be a traditional run from Colombia up to Mexico. Importantly, I think this is really important to point out that the search and rescue area is about 400 miles off the coast of Acapulco. Okay. This is not off the coast of Colombia. So it stands to reason those are the runs anyway. Where that goes is, you know, from the Colombian side to the Mexican side or somewhere in there, and then overground to the United States. So I think it's interesting that the search and rescue is again off the coast of Mexico and not the coast of Colombia.
Well, now we see the scope of this widening. So clearly we're tracking, or some element of the United States is tracking these vessels further along than where they were before. And the frequency seems to be picking up. Is this because there are more boats running, or is this because the military seems to be tracking those well-established routes and now taking them out?
The second part. It's not because there are more boats running. If anything, there are probably less boats running. But yes, we have to point out just kind of the geography. There's been a lot of attention in the Caribbean, off the coast of Venezuela. That has been the bulk of these strikes, without providing any evidence. But we have learned from our president that CIA operatives are on the ground in Venezuela. It stands to reason anyway. And then they're also looking at the Eastern Pacific route as well. So if anything, that has probably slowed down in terms of traffic. But it's a big area to cover. But in addition to all the huge military assets that are out there, you know, the destroyers, you've got aircraft, you've got surveillance aircraft. So they are getting much better at pointing out and focusing where these boats are, where they're going from, and where they're headed to. But again, we can only rely on the intelligence that this administration is giving us as journalists and even members of Congress as to whether the people who are on the boats are who they say they are and that they're trafficking what they say they're trafficking.
In our remaining 25 seconds or so, the likelihood of land operations in Venezuela, the president hasn't ruled them out.
Ruled it out. The commander-in-chief continues to repeat it. He repeated it today in an address to U.S. troops in Japan, that the land is going next. And really important, quickly, the aircraft carrier they're sending, the Ford aircraft carrier, from a military standpoint, you send the tools that are necessary for the job. And when you send an aircraft carrier to a location, that's not drug interdiction.
And the largest and newest one we have.
The largest and newest, most advanced, et cetera. It's coming a long way. A lot of people on board, 4,500 troops. You got aircraft, fighter aircraft, surveillance aircraft. You do that if you're going to launch a bombing campaign against the Houthis, not drug interdiction.
Which suggests something more may be afoot. And you'll be tracking it for us. Charlie Daggett, good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Major League Baseball looks to take action after the NBA betting scandal. More on the move to ban the bets that are accused of threatening the integrity of pro sports. You're watching The Takeout. Oh, hello. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we're watching this evening. We're following developing news out of the Middle East, where the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas could be at risk. Reuters reports Israel's launched strikes on Gaza after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered his military to immediately carry out powerful attacks. It comes as Israel and Hamas accuse each other of violating the ceasefire, with Israel's defense minister alleging Hamas attacked IDF soldiers in Gaza. Black Friday is only a month away, and two companies closely associated with the holiday shopping season have just announced major job cuts. UPS says it's reduced its management workforce by about 14,000 positions this year, and its operational workforce by 34,000. Amazon announced it'll begin cutting about 14,000 jobs from its corporate workforce as it looks for ways to reduce costs and remove layers of bureaucracy. Both companies say the cuts are not expected to affect operations. The state of Texas is suing Tylenol's former and current parent companies over claims the pain relievers linked to autism in children. The lawsuit claims Johnson & Johnson and later the spun-off company Kenvue hid the risk. Earlier this year, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. urged pregnant women not to take the drug. So did the president, citing that risk. Those claims, though, have been refuted by both the broader medical community and the company. And you may have heard the Los Angeles Dodgers and Toronto Blue Jays are back in action this evening after last night's, or really early this morning's, 18-inning instant classic. Tonight, Dodgers phenom Shohei Ohtani takes the mound to build on his historic playoff run. But at a time that's normally full of fanfare and pageantry, illegal gambling scandals paint an ugly backdrop across professional sports. Major League Baseball now says it's weighing banning all prop betting, or a wager on an individual player or event that isn't necessarily tied to the final outcome. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarlane joins us now. Did I get that right? That's what a prop bet is?
Yes. You sound familiar with it.
I've never placed one, no, for the record, but I've certainly become familiar with it because it's growing in such widespread popularity across the country, across all levels of sports.
And
right?
you don't have to partake in it to get familiar because of all the ads you keep seeing during the games. And that's how so many people became familiar with it, because it inundates you as you watch a football game, as you watch a baseball game, watch a tennis match. I'll tell you, one of the dynamics of prop betting that has raised people's concern is that there's a theory of the game that it could make players more corruptible. If an individual player is the subject of a bet, well, an individual player is easier to get to than an entire team is to get to. The other concern is that it's uniquely pernicious for problem gamblers. If you can make an in-game prop bet, you can make dozens of bets just sitting down to watch one 3-hour game. That obviously can lead to more trouble, more seismic losses for a problem gambler, and a more ferocious addiction.
And it's the idea that I'm sitting there in the third inning, and I can place a bet that says someone's going to hit a foul ball by the end of the game. I put $100 on that. And either you get that 100 back or you double or triple or whatever. And that's the addictive nature of this, is that you can literally be sitting on your couch, make those bets and make it happen. Now, whatever is up here involves Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine. What's up with that?
There had been a concern with the Cleveland baseball team, now called the Cleveland Guardians, about some pitches that were thrown in June that led to the suspension, at least temporary suspension, of the players so they could figure out what was going on with those pitches, because there seemed to be a surge in bets around those individual pitches that was not consistent with normal wagering. So there's an investigation going on there. Ohio's governor picked up on this. He had some concerns already about this prop betting for the reasons we just described. He also has concerns about college players in his state being menaced by would-be gamblers or dejected gamblers over their performances. He'd like to draw back some of what they legalized in that rush after the Supreme Court legalized sports betting. He'd like to draw back the prop betting. He's talked to the leagues. He's talked to Major League Baseball. He's somewhat confident the leagues may move on their own also, but he'd like to see it banned in his state.
It would be especially encouraging to see it addressed, especially at the college level, especially in Ohio. I mean, the football team's pretty good, but as you said, it could be pretty pernicious. Scott McFarlane, you'll be tracking it for us.
Will do.
I bet you'll have more to say about this in the coming days and weeks. You see what I did there, folks?
Nicely done.
All right. Illinois, the land of Lincoln, it's poised to be the latest state to redraw its congressional maps. So look at how House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is getting involved. Next, you're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Could Illinois become the next state to jump into what's become a nationwide redistricting battle? The campaign arm for House Democrats is touting a draft of a new congressional map that targets a district currently held by an Illinois Republican. Here with me now to discuss this and how it's playing out nationwide, CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall, and up in New York, Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Mr. Anthony Salvanto. Hunter, let's start with you. Walk us through these at least 9 states now that are toying with making changes similar to what we've seen in Texas and are anticipating in California.
Well, that's the thing. You know, California and Texas may just cancel each other out. So the changes happening in these other states, they loom large in this huge discussion about the 26 midterms. You have Missouri. They've already redrawn one congressional district held by a Democrat, now to favor a Republican. Also in North Carolina, they've taken a battleground congressional district held by a Democrat, redrawn that to favor a Republican candidate as well. Those are the 2 changes currently in law, but there's a whole bunch of other states that could actually make changes. You have in Utah, there's a court order that's going on right now. Virginia Democrats are trying to redraw in their Commonwealth, their state. Ohio is a state law that means they have to redistrict. In Indiana, Republicans, they're facing a lot of pressure to redistrict, and they seem to be caving, though it's not quite clear if that can actually pass at this point.
And Anthony, you've of course been crunching the numbers as you are so adept at doing. What will the maps potentially look like once this is all done, and who ultimately gets the advantage then? Is it a wash, or does one come out with an advantage?
Well, look, Ed, for one thing, you talk about the maps. Here's the map of the U.S. House after the last election. we don't normally pull this out and have to plug this in for at least until next year, if not for redistricting, for at least another 5 years, right? So that's a broader context here. But look, Hunter pointed out, if the Republicans were to get, let's say, 5 more seats out of Texas, if the redistricting measure passes and the Democrats get 5 more and cancel each other out of California, one of the things you're seeing is Republicans could stand to pick up another one out of North Carolina. You'd mentioned, and where there's a lot of talk about Indiana. I'll dive in there because it sort of illustrates an example for people watching this going through. Democratic districts often tend to be a little more packed in because there's a lot of Democrats that live around cities, right? So in this case, around Indianapolis, where they might, if new maps are proposed, carve up some of those districts and put them into then more Republican-leaning suburbs, et cetera. And you're going to see that dynamic play out again and again over the course of a lot of these states. Democrats, for their part now, are starting to talk about places like maybe going to Virginia, maybe going even to find a district in New York where they could start to add a few on their side as well. Again, all not something we are used to seeing in a year that ends in a 5, Ed.
The New York example, Hunter, is a legal fight, not a legislative fight, not a referendum, but an attempt to take essentially a Brooklyn or Staten Island district that's usually held by Republicans and argue it's become more Latino, has more black voters than it traditionally has in years past, and therefore should be subject to a redraw.
That's the fascinating thing there, this idea. It's the congressional district held by Representative Millie Takis, and this idea that this should be the district that's one of the rare Republican districts in that part of New York. Being targeted in this lawsuit, essentially, it seems like a little bit of a Hail Mary attempt by Democrats to try and get some way to change the maps in New York. It's a tough one, and it's unclear what's going to happen there.
So, Anthony, is it fair to say if the California Proposition 50 passes next week that essentially draws Democrats as many as 5 more seats, that you could put down, roughly, 45, 46 of the seats in the 53 seats in that state in the blue column and go from there?
So there's a dynamic here, Ed, across all of this. It includes California, also includes Texas and others. When a party gerrymanders a district, they do run the risk that they dilute their voters, that they spread them out into other districts. If they don't get the same support, and I'm just going to draw another number here, 96%, right? That's the percent of Democrats who voted for Democrats, Republicans who voted for Republicans in the last midterm. But if that varies a little bit, then some of these redraws could backfire on them. They could get districts that aren't quite as partisan as they had hoped, to say nothing of some of the new voters in there. And look, here's one other thing. You mentioned legal fights. I'm going to draw a circle around the South, because there's another thing going on here, too, with the Supreme Court. If they were to decide a case, and this is going to take months, that were to reverse part of the Voting Rights Act, then possibly Republicans who control the redistricting in these southern states might have a chance to redraw some of these lines, too, and gain even more seats out of the South, Ed.
To be continued. Anthony Salvanto, I'm glad you're tracking it. Hunter Woodall, you as well. Thank you both for being here. We'll talk much more about this in the coming week. But next, Ken Burns on his new documentary about the American Revolution and how it could help with the divisions being felt today. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. A new documentary series centered on the United States War for Independence is premiering on PBS next month. Here's a preview.
We think about independence movements of the 20th century. You don't always recognize the fact that the United States actually started that.
The American Revolutionary Movement served as a model for freedom from oppression.
America is predicated on an idea that tells us who we are, where we came from, and what our forebears were willing to die for.
Co-directors of the American Revolution, Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein, join me now. Great to see you both. Thank you for being here on what I know has been an extensive promotional tour, but for a real important piece of work.
Yeah, we think so. I don't think I'm going to work on a more important film than this. We've got other things that we hope are as important, but I think particularly now in the divisions that we experience, the idea of going back and collecting a not superficial or sentimental view of our founding provides us with a kind of energy that allows us to understand where we are because we know where we came from. And our revolution is incredibly complicated. A revolution superimposed on a bloody, bloody civil war, superimposed on a world war. And I think people don't really appreciate. You think it's men in Philadelphia thinking great thoughts, and it is. And those are the biggest thoughts there are. But when you find out the teenagers that are fighting it, the kids that involve, the women, Native peoples, free and enslaved, Black Americans, all the foreign powers that are vying for the prize of North America, this is a big epic saga that I think we haven't really been taught about it. And Sarah and I have spent the last nearly 10 years diving deep into the story of it to bring out something that I think will take familiar people, so-called familiar people like Washington, and make them dimensional and human, and then introduce you to dozens of other people you've never heard of.
And this is a 12-hour production spread out over several nights. One of the things, as a former newspaper reporter who's come to appreciate the visual medium much more, that I know you guys struggled with at the beginning but turned into such incredible work, is there was, of course, no video of the American Revolution. How do you come up with 12 hours of something visually compelling? And what kind of research went into doing that?
Yeah, I mean, research is at the heart of what we do and how we make these films. And I think when we started, we both gulped and thought, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to rely on the photographic record, on newsreels and news reports. But actually, it turned into both a creative opportunity and it made us use our imaginations in new and different ways. And we were able to really dig deep on what exists from the archive, whether it's maps or pamphlets, letters, diaries, church logs, military roles and things like that, but then also to shoot live cinematography of this incredible country and this incredible landscape and imagine where people lived, where they walked, where they saw the war happen or moved, and bring people to life in new and different ways. So it started out as something that we were a little bit frightened of, and then we really leaned into it, and we love using paintings, oil paintings, and the way that we've imagined the war for the last 250 years, as well as live cinematography and documents from the time.
I've never been a fan of reenactments, and this time we suddenly realized we just had to get over it. And so we did it a little bit differently. Rather than say, please reenact the Battle of Bunker Hill, we spent years embedded with reenactment groups, they're so profoundly curious about what actually took place. And I'm absolutely confident that their underwear is right, as well as the outer uniforms. And they were so kind to us to let us in. And so what we did, rather than say, do this for us, we collected over the years a whole critical mass of footage that we could then blend in with what Sarah's talking about. The maps, the paintings, the drawings, the documents, as well as the first-person commentary of the people who lived through it. And we have the biggest cast list that's ever been assembled for any film or television show ever, in terms of the wattage of star power and of acting chops that read off camera the voices of the people that I think help bring to life the footage and the archival material that we have.
And a really signature part of your documentaries through the years. I guess this could go in so many different directions, but what will perhaps be most surprising to a viewer, whether you're a casual, student of the American Revolution or someone more deeply immersed in it?
If it's my experience as any indication, everything is going to be new. Like, you always think you know something, and I've been involved in making history films for a long time. I've passed through the revolution and other things. It's basically, rather than telling you what you should know, we're sharing with you our process of discovery. So at every single level, take something that may seem obvious to people. Without George Washington, we don't have a country. But can I introduce you to a 10-year-old girl who's a refugee for most of the war, 10 years old when the war began in 1775, and dozens of people in between that, Irish and German and English and Welsh and Scottish, as well as the people on the ground, loyalists, a big important part. And because we sort of like to say that we're umpires calling balls and strikes, we don't make somebody wrong because they made a decision to defend their sovereign and the British constitutional monarchy that looked like the safest bet in the world. and not for this radical idea of these upstarts, these rebels, which is what the British always calls it. So I think that every day was a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the only thing I would add to that is that it's such a surprising story. It's a great underdog story, and it's really inspiring, and you feel extremely patriotic while you're watching it, and so surprised that we were able to do what we were able to do ultimately, both here and with the help of the French and where we sat on the global stage. It's really, I think it's a great moment to be inspired about and really proud of what we did.
Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein, stay with me. Our conversation will continue in a moment after the break. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein are back with me. Sarah, what about this current period of U.S. history that we're in might make this documentary either timely or helpful? Well, I think we talk a lot right now about how we're divided, how this is a deeply divided time in our country's history and how polarized we are. We were really deeply divided in the American Revolution, maybe more so than we are today. And actually, in thinking about the last 250 years, each time we've come together as a country to celebrate July 4th, 1776, we've been divided. We've been debating and arguing about what parts of our history to celebrate, the dynamics of government, states' rights versus the federal government, all the things that we constantly talk about in our culture. So I think America has a long tradition of public debate, of engaged citizenship, of divisions of how our government should be, and that started at our founding. You recently said that I just really hope the film has the ability to speak to the people who are concerned about the direction of the country, whoever that might be.
Yeah, I think, I've been traveling the country, Sarah and I have been traveling the country, talking to groups everywhere, and we haven't changed what we're saying. We don't have a different spiel for, Joe Rogan as we might for the editorial board of the New York Times. And what we're trying to say is this is our origin story. Everyone I know in the country can find a portal, an entrance to this story, and feel, as Sarah's saying, patriotic and proud about it. It isn't just, Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill, and then, Washington crosses the Delaware, and then Yorktown surrender. There are 40 or 50 battles we're going to introduce you to, but we're also going to understand what's happening at home, what the role of women has been on the battlefield and attending things, children, and the complicated dynamics of the Native Americans that are part of our country, that are coexisting with our country, and those nations on the western border who are big players on the world stage, as important in diplomacy and trade as, say, France or Prussia is. And so if you tell a complex story, I think it tends to flatten out or maybe just release all of the binaries that we have at red state, blue state, whatever it is that divide us. And then you begin to sense that we're not that far apart. We just have different takes on it. And if you can come together over something in which we can assure you is fact-based, there's so many outlets, people get so much information from places in which there are no fact checkers. All we do for the last year and a half is fact check and make sure that it's right. And I think then people can feel a kind of comfort and come into this living room and sit around this table and participate in their own birthright, which is the big question: what happened at our founding, and what it is, those big questions, what you're willing to sacrifice your life for. Well, the American Revolution comes out soon on PBS, right? Over 6 nights, right? November 16th, Sunday, 16th. and it'll be immediately available for free to stream, and there's a companion book, and they are also these things, you've probably not heard of them, called DVDs and Blu-rays that will also be around. Because good stocking stuffer. I may be the last, we may be the last people who actually enjoy people wanting to have a hard copy of the stories that we're telling. Excellent. Well, I look forward to watching the rest of it. I started it. It's really compelling so far. Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, thank you so much for being here. That does it for The Takeout for today. Stick around. The Daily Report starts right now.